Jack Tame,
Gentlemen,
welcome to Between Two Beers.
thank you for having me. And sorry to have already opened my beer.
No, please be our
Very
guest.
rude.
Be our guest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sip away. First time, we're in the ACC studios again tonight. Is this your first time in here, Jack?
I don't think it is. I've been in here a couple of times, but it's weird because I feel like Mike Lane, one of the guys, you know, they've got the little headsets. It's like the little, it's not a Madonna mic, but it's kind of like a, it's, you know what it is? It's like a boxing commentator mic.
Yeah.
And that's when I think of the ACC, I always think of the guys wearing these ridiculous little mics. Yeah. So no, it's a brush with fame. I do have my Steady the Ship hat, but I'm eyeing up some of the ACC.
I'll let you take it.
Do you reckon the blazers,
yeah,
the
have
cream
whatever-
blazers?
have whatever
I'm
you want.
surprised
Yeah,
they
whatever you
actually look
want.
as cream as they are, because they you sort of, given some of the hijinks, expect them to be a bit more stained.
That's almost a khaki.
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
a bit of an embarrassing correspondence with you earlier today, which I wanted to take back as soon as I sent it. So I sent Jack an email saying, like, we're based in the ACC studios. You could find some off-street parking. It's at Graham Street. Text me when you're outside. And then later, when I was doing a bit of research, I was like, he's been working at Newstalk ZB for like a million
For a
years.
long
He's
time.
got a car park in this building.
He was
And here I
literally
am,
here
treating me
an hour ago. Yeah. No, it was very helpful. Thank you. I appreciated
It's one of those ones. As soon
the
as it's-
considered logistics. Yeah.
I wanted it back straight away. I was like,
I was
I've
like,
let myself down.
no,
there.
no,
But
no.
welcome back to work.
Thank you very much, guys. No, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, good. We've got a lot of areas to get stuck into. The way we do things is we tell the audience how we know the guests. So, Shay, how do you know Jack Tame?
First time to meet, obviously watched your work. My Sunday mornings, booze-free, are a lot more concentrated, and I'm able to digest some of your work that way. In researching the podcast, though, I stumbled across... I always try and find a connection if I don't know the person. So our connection is I'm very similar to you in that I have recently picked up Worldle.
Oh,
Wordle, are you saying?
no. Worldle.
Worldle.
Do you not know about Worldle?
What's Wordle?
Oh, mate, you're living in the past. So you got your Wordle. Only losers play Wordle.
Okay.
I mean, I play
I
that.
don't
I
know.
play that as well.
Sorry, Jay.
Just
No. Okay, so Worldle. Actually, I didn't.
Did you get it today?
Okay, for some reason the beta app wasn't working for me. Did we say beta or beta?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so
I'm operating on a
Worldle is
Sigma.
fantastic. Okay, here we go.
You haven't
Steve's
got
gonna
it
do
yet.
No, here we go.
I won't spoil it for you.
So you are presented with with the outline of a country, as in the physical borders of a country.
I got it in 2, just so you know.
Shit.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And you have to guess that country. And every time you get it wrong, it tells you how far off you are and how many kilometers you are.
Okay.
So are you going to do this, or am I going to do it?
No, I'm not going to do it. For a man who's been to every continent in the world, I feel like this is right up your alley. But Shay, you a geography guy?
Big geography guy. I got it in.
Are you?
I got it in 2.
Okay, so I'm looking at this, and there's a peninsula that juts in along the southern border of this country.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's like a relatively cubic-looking country. This is dynamic. I can tell that we've already lost most of our listeners. Okay, so
I just want to see what your first guess is.
It's kind of cubic. It looks like there is a body of water, a large body of water on one side.
He's going through all the steps I went through.
I'm going to say that this is potentially Central Asia.
Central Asia was what I was going to say.
You
Okay.
weren't going to say that at all. That's also not a country.
But
He's
I'm
got there
concerned.
first.
I'm concerned that Shay got this in one. So, and he's already looking quite pleased with himself.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm gonna guess.
No, I got it in 2.
Oh, you got on two. Okay, I'm gonna stick with Central Asia, and I'm gonna say Turkmenistan. Okay, which is a bold call.
Good guess.
Yeah.
Yes, 90%. So I'm
Wow.
2,000 kilometers off Turkmenistan. So
fair.
what is 2,000 kilometers directly directly west of Turkmenistan?
Good. That's a bloody good question.
Steve doesn't know
Yeah,
where
come on.
Turkmenistan is.
One of the stans, Afghanistan.
Nah, it's not. No, that's a good try.
Yeah.
Okay, I reckon it's 2,000 kilometers. So New Zealand to Australia is about 3,000.
This is a lot more
So
detailed.
2,000. I'm going to say, off just as a random guess, I'm tempted to say Azerbaijan.
One of the stans.
That's
Oh, 95%. You beat me, Shay. So we're 1,000 kilometers away,
I'll be messaging you tomorrow. by the way,
directly
on-
west of Azerbaijan.
Okay. It's hard to think of a worse game, I think, for the podcast.
Okay,
audience
yeah.
to
This is
listening
how long did you say this was again? Yeah. So you get the idea of Worldle. Hang on, we're gonna have to finish this off.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love how invested Jack is in this straight away.
Yeah.
This is one of the pillars of my day.
Yeah.
in the morning.
Help him out then.
I'm not going to help him out.
Okay,
God no.
I'm gonna say Georgia.
I wouldn't say Georgia.
You wouldn't?
Not what I would have gone with.
780 kilometers away from Georgia.
We're getting closer.
Yeah, we're getting closer, but we're not close enough, unfortunately.
Only 3 more guesses.
Yeah, so we're 3 more guesses
While you
away.
work that out,
Okay, yeah, please.
Stephen, what's your connection to
Hang
Jack?
on, do you know about Tradle?
I don't know.
You're not living till you're playing Trade.
What's Tradle?
Tradle? Okay, so Tradle, I got Tradle into today.
It's a trade me
So
situation.
you are presented with a country's export market
Oh,
and largest
That's-
exports by industry. So,
I'm
what
out.
has an export market of $1.15 billion, 23% rolled tobacco, there's a fucking big clue in that, 17% raw sugar, then zinc ore, nickel, hard liquor. There's some massive, and then crustaceans, massive clues in that. I got it in one.
Cuba.
Cuba, baby.
This guy. Eh?
Eh?
This guy. Nice.
We
Come
could-
into the
okay, I'll come
highlights
back
clip.
to Worldle.
We might be
Yeah.
best. We might be best friends.
Yeah.
Steve, while Jack is lagging
Yeah, sorry.
behind,
I feel like we've lost Jack. He's,
Yeah.
he's in his game. You
we'll
brought up
pull
Worldle
him back in.
and-
How do you know Jack?
How do I know Jack? I think
He's
maybe
given up. He's given up on
I'll
the
come
world.
back to
10
it.
years-ish ago, when you were the US correspondent, I remember seeing you. Like, perhaps a lot of people's first impression was, how is this young kid got such a cushy job, was my first thought. And the more I saw you, I was like, I can see how he's got such a good job, because he's absolutely nailing it. And I followed your Herald on Sunday column. I've listened to your Newstalk ZB. I've watched you on Breakfast. But perhaps when you went up in my elevation the most was when I saw you on Late Night Big Breakfast,
Oh.
which is one of my
So
favorite
good.
shows of all time. I was like, Jack, he gets it. Jack is in on the joke. Like, this is amazing. You played like the straight man perfectly. But what was that? I find it, it's quite funny, your whole body of work that we start with Late Night Big
No,
Breakfast, but-
that was a career highlight. It was so good. Do you know how hard it is though? Because you can imagine the production that goes into the Late Night Big Breakfast is about as loose as you could possibly imagine. Like, you turn up like at a sort of rough time that Leigh told you one time when he passed you on the street randomly, and you're like, okay. And I mean, it is literally filmed in a Target.
Yeah.
Obviously, like you go to a Target store and there are people buying, settees and discount beds and shit. And-
Haberdashery.
Yeah, haberdashery. Yeah. You're like, oh, okay. And they basically were just like, yeah, we'll just like kind of riff around you and just just be yourself, but try and be straight if you can. But honestly, the times they were doing it, I was having to bite down on the back of my cheek so hard. 'Cause
Really?
I was weeping, especially when there's something about Jason Hoyte. I just think Jason Hoyte is the most, and I mean, Leigh's amazing, don't get me wrong, but Jason Hoyte is, I just think, like a genius in our midst. I just think he's incredible. And listening to the ACC, I'm like, fuck, this guy is outstanding, because he never breaks. You never hear him flinch, you never hear him laugh or joke or and he just holds the line. I just think he's amazing. And so, yeah, when we were filming that, honestly, I went back and watched it once they put it out, and then I watched it a couple of times, and then I went back and watched it, and I could see where they'd had to edit, because I was deliberately turning my face away from the camera because I was laughing so hard. It was so much fun. So I hope they'll have me back to do it again.
Was that your first time doing something not journalism on camera?
I think. I did a bit of. I maybe did a bit of sort of. I think I was on What Now back in the day. Back in the day.
Good.
The sort of.
You think you were on what
No,
now?
I
Were
was.
you?
I was
Yeah.
on What Now. I was on What Now. I did a sort of bit of that, and then I and
It's
then
okay to be on What Now, by the way.
Yeah.
There's no shame in that. You don't have to hide the fact that you were on What Now. A lot of people have done that.
I had to do. It was a Shortland Street anniversary of some description, or some special show where they were imagining Rangi Toto erupting.
Oh, that was a
in
Mark
Auckland.
Ellis stunt.
No, yeah, that's right. How did he get away with that, eh? Yeah. So anyway, there was something, and I had to kind of play myself on that. But I suppose if you're playing yourself and you're just reading the news or whatever.
Oh, sorry,
And
you
are
were
a
on
newsreader.
what now as an adult?
No, I was on what now is about an 18-year-old. It was a part-time job I had, and probably as a 17 or 18-year-old.
Just,
I was on one now, yeah.
Just back to late night Big Breakfast.
Yeah.
When you're recording, like there's so much hijinks going on around you. I imagine you don't know really what they've got or what part of the show you're going to be in. Are you watching it at home later with the rest of New Zealand to see like what they've made of you?
Yeah, I mean, they don't share it with you beforehand.
Yeah.
Amazing.
No, I got it when I waited for it to come out whenever it came out, and I had, Leigh's not like the king of communication. I can't impress upon you how loose it was. Like it's like, their office is directly above the.
Oh, really?
Their office is above Target. I think they only filmed there because Leigh bumped into the manager once and was like, "Oh yeah, we're looking for a space," and they were like, "Oh, if only you had a large and predominantly empty furniture showroom."
Yeah.
He was like, "Oh yeah."
One of the all-time moments on that show, and Leigh talked about it when we had him on the podcast, was the Mongolian throat singer. You talk about Jason never cracking, and that scene at the end where him and Jeremy are just wheezing and Leigh has to remove himself.
Oh, it's a special form of genius, that program. And then it's a great measure of people as to whether or not they'll buy into it, whether or not they'll kind of take the piss out of themselves, I always think, on those programs.
Yes.
They get the pollies on sometimes, and they when they're game, it can be really kind of revealing and funny, and
that's why it connected with me, because
you
could see you were game, you were up for the joke, you didn't mind it. It was.
I watched that as a fan all the time.
Yeah.
When they asked me, I was stoked.
Yeah.
So no, that was a pleasure. I don't know what's happening though. They get their shit together and get another season up.
Yeah.
We'd done an episode with Leigh Hart, and he seemed like he was dead keen to get back into creating.
Again, though. Leigh. Is he? Is he? Yeah, is he? Yeah. No, I'm sure he is.
Oh, well, the other thing we do here is we canvass your friends and colleagues and people who know you well to get a little bit of info sort of behind the scenes. So a couple of people we've spoken to, there's a few nice things, so just bear with us here.
Jeez.
So Scotty Stevenson is one of the most talented, most impressive guests that we've had on the show. And he had this to say, amongst other things. He said, Jack is one of the most incredibly talented people I've ever met. Coming from him is really, really powerful for us.
Yeah.
And we also had Chris Chang, who works with you at
Might be
TVNZ.
quite as warm.
He said, Jack is a prodigious worker, but despite his notoriety as the darling of TVNZ, he's actually a great loyal friend who's generous to a fault. Chang goes on, he's recently had to curb his attendance at Les Mills grit classes, which he regularly attended with Lorde, as it wasn't appearing to have any tangible benefits on his squash game. Now, there's a few things here. I'm going to leave the squash stuff aside for now, but going to Les Mills with Lorde?
I think I went to Les Mills with Lorde once, and to be clear, I didn't go with Lorde. I bumped into Lorde, who was a friend of a friend, and so went to a class in the in a sort of general proximity of Lorde. But I'm quite a sweaty individual. I mean, actually, Chris Chang, he should see a specialist because I think he has some sort of glandular problem. He's the sweatiest person I've ever met. We play squash, and he'll bring 3 T-shirts just because he just works through them.
We've got a friend like that, Jeremy Field.
Yeah,
very
some
sweaty
people are
man.
just big sweaters, eh? Yeah. So no, I was a big Les Mills goer, but I hadn't quite bought into it. I was one of these people who loved going, but was always aware that everyone was so beautiful and looked so amazing. And I'm quite an uncomfortable looking. I'm really limmy. I always remember Stephen Merchant in the Cal Pilkington podcast saying he was like an albatross on stilts, and that's how I feel. Like I've got a lot of limbs, and they're all going in different directions, Yeah. And the problem with Les Mills and gyms like them is they fucking love a mirror. Right? And so for most people, that's great because they look young and taut and lean and beautiful and whatever, and dressed up in the Lululemons to the nines. But I was always like, fuck, I look bad. Like the discrepancy between how I thought I looked and how I looked was always massive.
Yeah.
But I'm quite a sucker for a grit class from time to time. Just 25 minutes in and out,
I'm going to try and squeeze any juice out of the story because there's still, it sounds like there was a class that involved you and Lorde at Les Mills. Are people doing a triple take on that one? Are they
I don't think anyone cares about me.
Are you sure?
It was like, yo, Lorde, Lorde's boxing.
You might
or
attract
Lorde's,
the glance in the first instance. And they're like, who's he with? What?
Yeah. No, she was from memory, she had a very good. It was the class where it's sort of, I don't know if you've ever been to the Victoria Park, Les Mills.
I have not.
It's like there's this one room that has a real sex dungeon vibe.
Wow.
In a good way.
Red room.
Yeah, it is. It's like that. You go in there and you're like, there's a hell of a lot of latex for a Tuesday 12:15 class, you know?
Yeah, that was Tuesday, 12:15.
Yeah.
just to be clear.
And it was like a boxing class, right? And so you go in and you have to box, and then you go and run on a treadmill, and then you box some more, and then you do some squats and stuff. And so, but the good thing about it is the mirrors are somewhat darkened. So I don't know. It must be so hard for someone like Ella, someone like Lorde, going around, because, I mean, I do morning TV or a bit of reporting. I can imagine. Can you imagine always having eyes on you? It would be so annoying.
You'd get quite deep in the disguise game.
Well, wouldn't you just? I mean, imagine being like, she has achieved so much. She's had such incredible success. But at 75, if she wants to duck out and have a burrito, there's going to be someone who comes up to her and goes, "Oh my God,
Does it happen to you?
You're amazing." It does, not heaps, and it doesn't bother me, but it does. It's funny when you go. I live in Central Auckland. I live on K Road, and I do work a lot, and so I probably have a bubble that's pretty like Central Aucklandy, and no one in Central Auckland really watches TV.
Yeah.
And so, but if you go to like smaller centres, or if I go, go and see friends in Christchurch or whatever, all of a sudden people come up and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I saw you on TV the other night." And I go, "Oh shit, yeah, that's right. I'm working in a very, very public medium." Or because I do a lot of politics now, if I'm in Wellington, often I'll bump into people I know. But it's definitely not. It's not like I'm Jay-Z walking down the street.
It surprised you that we had a night out. I say night out. We went to a bar with Paddy Gower in Hamilton once.
He's another level.
Swamped like I've never seen before.
Paddy Gower's an incredibly recognisable person, and he's also one of those people who just has a lot of time for anyone who comes up. And he has a lot of time for everyone. I mean, Paddy's he's a phenomenon, really. That doesn't surprise me. I would have thought like him, John Campbell,
Stephen Adams.
Stephen Adams, yeah, but in the news world, probably him and JC are probably the ones who would get the most, and their lives would be totally different to mine. Yeah.
We're going to start the real chat in 2013. So the late Paul Holmes has just stepped away from Newstalk ZB's Saturday morning show, and a 25-year-old with no radio experience broadcasting live from New York on Friday nights is his replacement. So one of New Zealand radio's biggest gigs, and they've given it to you based on the work you've been doing on TV. But that seems like an incredible punt and an incredible sort of nod of the hat to what they had seen your potential talent to be.
Yeah. I think there were a few factors that came into it. So, first of all, good luck. And I'm not saying, I have worked super hard throughout my career. There's no doubt that I've worked a lot. But I also think that I benefited from getting in just at this really special moment in news and journalism and in broadcasting, especially in TV. Because to take it back a bit, when I started, TV was very rarely live. And so, when you watch the 6 o'clock news, almost everything was a pre-prepared package that the newsreader would throw to. And it took it was a massive logistical effort to set up satellites and all those sorts of things to do a live cross. And because it had always been a rarity, a lot of the senior reporters hadn't been very comfortable being live on television. But because I came in really young, I came in as a bit of a show-off and a bit of a performer anyway. And because everything terrified me, I was much more confident live on TV than perhaps more senior reporters, just because I was shit at everything, right? And I was like, everything's terrifying to me. I'm fucking terrified to unlock the building in the morning, And so, as a result of that, because I was enthusiastic about going live when some other people were a bit edgy, I probably got more opportunities, sooner than I might otherwise have had, and just benefited from being in this, coming into the industry in this little window of 2 or 3 years, and through that got the opportunities that then probably brought me to the attention of the ZB bosses. And it was funny, they called me because I'd been in New York for maybe a year or so at that stage, and they called me and it was when they were changing what was Close Up, which was the TV1 7 o'clock show with Sainsbury back in the day. They were changing that to 7 Sharp, and there was a rumor going around somewhere that I was going to be one of the presenters on 7 Sharp. It was a program where they had a few different presenters, and so the boss rang me of ZB and said, "Hey, we've heard a rumor that you might be coming back to 7 Sharp. And if you do come back, would you be interested in doing radio?" And I'd come to know Paul Holmes a little bit, and he'd been really supportive of me. And so, I said, "Oh, well, I'd love to do radio, but I'm not coming back. I'm not coming to be a presenter. I'm here reporting. That's what I'm doing." Tell you what, though, the time difference is pretty convenient. What do you say? We set up and do a radio show from New York. And to his massive credit, because it was a real punt, he was like, "Yeah, okay, well, let's give it a crack." And I mean, it wasn't without its ups and downs, and I wouldn't even go so far as saying that I've necessarily repaid that faith. But it was a massive punt, because that sort of thing never happened. And it was amazing because the way we did it was, back in the day, Newstalk was owned by Clear Channel, which is one of the massive media companies in America that owns, the top 40 radio stations in New York, the top talk stations in New York. And so we just called them out of the blue, Kiwi styles, and we're like, "Yo, we're doing a show in New Zealand." And we just have a studio, and it was, because of the time difference, it was 5 p.m. on a Friday till 8 p.m. on a Friday in New York. So it was actually an incredibly convenient time, because I could get in an hour before the end of their week. The technician could check that I was connected to New Zealand, and then everyone fucked off. And so I would just sit there by myself for 3 hours, and no one knew I was in the building. No one cared that I was in the building. And it was crazy. Like, sometimes, I remember this one time, I was sitting in my studio, and I walked out in a little ad break, and just standing next to me in the studio right next door, just standing there, texting, was Cher. And I was like... and no one was like, it was just totally normal, because this is the kind of studio we were in, and I was like, "Oh, fuck, okay, back to go and talk to Kevin Milne." Yeah. So, and the crazy thing was that, probably shouldn't say this, but Clear Channel ended up selling Newstalk ZB, but we just bought the technicians at Clear Channel in New York a crate of wine every year, of New Zealand wine. And we never told them that Clear Channel had been sold. So for 5 years or 4 years,
really
I just
Kiwi.
broadcasted every Friday from New York, from like these amazing studios in Tribeca, next to Cher, next to like the top radio DJs in the Northeast in the US. Like, you just honestly, you walk down the hall, it's like, "Oh, there's A$AP Rocky, all good, cool, off to go and talk gardening with Rude." Like, it was, and it was an amazing setup.
So that's a dream job for anyone in their life. It's just wild that you were 25, living in New York, doing it on a Friday night. Like, I think of the people you're bouncing around with during the day or whatever. Like, "I got to do this radio show." They'd think, "Oh, probably no one's listening to that." No, it's one of the biggest radio shows in New Zealand. Hundreds of thousands of people listening.
I mean, it was. I did feel like I lived a double life, because I would go, and I was pretty social in New York, as one tends to be when they're in their mid-20s, and and. So I'd have like indoor soccer sometimes. So I'd go into, I'd be doing a show in New Zealand, and I'd be looking at the news in New Zealand. I'd always have to like check the forecast, say, right, okay, it's 25 degrees in Auckland today, it's 22 in Wellington, whatever, 24 in Christchurch. And it might be minus 15 in New York. And so I'd go in a snowstorm, and then I'd be like, "Right, just try and forget about that for a few minutes," and
what a great day in
on
Auckland.
New Zealand. Yeah, exactly. Beautiful day out there, guys. And then go straight downstairs, jump on the subway, go and play indoor soccer with, a group of Italian Americans. And it was just this like, it was like I was living in 2 dimensions. It was whack.
Reflecting on it now, like you're lighting up talking about it, did you know at the time how incredible it was?
Yeah, I did. I mean, and it's really easy when you look back to think, you only focus on the good things. I mean, there were definitely times when it was, when shit went wrong or it was super stressful. But I did shows from crazy places. I did crosses from casino floors, literally like on the floor of a casino in Las Vegas, because that was the only place that I could get a good enough internet connection. I remember doing, so I would do stuff for Mike Hosking's show. I would do kind of, here's what's happening in America kind of shit. And I was in Alaska covering the Iditarod, which is the husky race that they have that goes up into the, near the Arctic Circle every year. And so I was kind of like in the middle of this snow-swept landscape in this four-wheel drive that I'd hired with chains on, sitting in the back of my car doing a cross to Mike Hosking, being like, yeah, Barack Obama's done. And it was this, there was all these times that I just had to pinch myself and think, shit, this is such a whack situation.
That's the other layer to it, right? Is that you were the US correspondent for TVNZ.
Yeah.
So as well as having the staple show back here in New Zealand, you're covering these, and let's not beat around the, like, when the US correspondent reports back on something, it's generally a pretty big deal that's happened in America. It's not like, the local
it's usually
bakery
the biggest. It's the biggest story. Usually.
Exactly, right.
It's either a big story or it's like a New Zealander's done well in something.
Yeah. So it's you're juggling those sorts of things as well,
Yeah,
as well as
yeah.
writing a column every week for the
I was
Sunday
doing,
Sunday Herald on Sunday.
But again, like I was, it was a fucking sweet gig. It was awesome in that I just was able to live in multiple worlds at once, and there were heaps and heaps of upsides. There were a few downsides in that sometimes I felt like I know this will sound crazy, but I felt like I was too connected to New Zealand still. I still felt, I was like, if I'm going to be overseas, then I should totally cut the cord, But I lived in East Harlem, which is, I lived on when I moved into the street that I lived on, the street was about 50% Dominican, 50% Puerto Rican, and 0.01% Christchurch. And, so everyone on my street called me arroz, which is the Spanish word for rice, because they all eat rice and beans, frijoles y arroz. And they'd be like, you're the grain of rice in the bowl of rice and beans, right? And so I kind of had this existence. And I'd walk out on the stoop outside my apartment, and guys would be literally like rolling dice,
like you see
gambling
in
the street like you see in movies, smoking weed on the street. And, in summer, they'd crank open the fire hydrants and all the kids would play in the fire hydrants outside. And I'd be kind of living that life, but at the same time, really patched into New Zealand as well. And the best thing was the time zone difference, because a lot of people think that it's a desirable thing if you're a reporter in New Zealand to work in London. But if you're doing that and you're working for news, you've got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do a cross at 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever. But in New York, you just stay up until 2 a.m. And then you go and do whatever. And obviously in a city like New York, you can do whatever.
Yeah. So you're young, you're talented, but you've got a lot to learn in radio still. It's your first proper radio gig. You've mentioned already Paul Holmes and Mike Hosking. What did you learn from them? What do you remember from the late Paul Holmes?
We crossed a little bit when I was working in both TV and in radio, and I came to know him better when he was quite sick, and he just talked to me a little bit about structuring interviews, which I know sounds like quite a dull thing, but to try and build a storyline, like a narrative through an interview, so that you're not ever just going this question, but you giving context for why you're asking questions, and in doing so you can actually reveal more about a person or their beliefs. But he also just I remember he just encouraged me about being live on TV, about trying to go or on radio and trying to go live as much as possible. But he was great. After I took over the show, because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I really don't know what I'm doing. And I was very well supported by ZB at the time. And he just, I remember he immediately sent me a message in that first week and all that stuff and said, it sounds great. Even though I went back a few months later and listened to my first show and I was like, that was dog shit, man. I don't know what I was doing. But it's funny, I've seen Hosking in action a few times. Like I've watched him in action a few times. I've listened to him a lot, and I'm probably in I'm probably in a position where I can judge really good broadcasters, especially like live news broadcasters. And the thing is, like, obviously Hosking isn't everyone's cup of tea, and I get that. I mean, I disagree with half the shit he says, But when I listen to him broadcasting by himself, I can only assure anyone that he is so far ahead of everyone else in New Zealand broadcasting in terms of radio news broadcasting. That guy, as a broadcaster, forget whatever he's saying. You don't have to agree with his opinions, but in terms of a broadcaster, the things that he is able to do, the agility that he has to move between different segments, to cover different subjects, to tease something, to be funny, and to be on time, it's just amazing. I mean, he's got a clock sitting in front of him the whole time, and I've filled him for his shows plenty of times, and he might have, in the space of 9 minutes, he knows he's got to do 3 interviews, an opinion piece, tease something, crack a joke, and hit an ad break. And he's like, when I say hit an ad break, I mean down to the second. The ad break's going to play whether he speaks or not, but you never know that when you're listening. You never know that he's speaking exactly the time. Like if I said to you right now, give me a minute 41, go, Hosking would hit a minute 41, no sweat, but he'd do it in a way that you never knew he was speaking to time. And I just, when I listen to him, I'm like, fuck, man, that guy is so good. In the same way that Holmes was, like just as a broadcaster, again, opinions, whatever, but as a broadcaster, I'm like, shit, that's a guy, at the very top of his game.
It's a real art, right? Like we did Matt Heath in this same studio straight after he'd come off the Matt and Jerry show in the morning, and it was the same thing. He even told us beforehand, he's like, look, I'm really sorry, guys. I tend to speak in whatever
3 minute,
3 minute bursts, and it literally was like that. And Stephen and I were both kind of like, oh fuck, we've got to. Like, it puts you on your game,
absolutely,
if you're not used to it.
I mean, you had Polly on as well, right, PJ?
Yeah.
I mean, I think PJ is right up there with the very best commercial radio broadcasters I've ever heard. I mean, she was just like, and the thing about Hosking, and I'm not suggesting that PJ doesn't have this as well, but the thing about Hosking is he does the whole show by himself, and he doesn't have a song to throw to. Yeah. That guy's just going interview, opinion piece, interview, ad, interview, like just that the whole time. And he's able to weave it together in a way that when I listen to it as someone who's done the job and can probably appreciate all of the plates that he's spinning at any time, I'm just like, fuck, that guy is so good. Yeah.
Do you try to replicate
No.
when you step into it?
No, I mean, the good thing about the radio show that I do is it's relaxed. So I actually try to do something completely different in that I try to bring in a really positive energy. My show's on Saturday mornings, so I deliberately try to make it not too newsy, especially for the Newstalk audience, because I know that the whole week they've had news, opinion, the government's shit, or like, the opposition's shit, whatever, and that everyone's, or like COVID, and that sometimes it's actually nice just to be like, yo, let's just talk about something completely different. And so often I'll just touch on a bit of a news thing and then do something that's quite a bit lighter or a bit more relaxed. But if I haven't done it for a while, but in filling in for Mike, there's no or on Drive for Heather or anything. There's just no room for error. You can't afford to go a minute long on anything because you're the only person who's going to dig you out of that hole. And in the times that I've done it, and the few times that it's felt good, like I've come out of the studio and thought, shit, yeah, that was probably as good as I can get in replicating that kind of broadcasting cohesion. I've just realized the focus and skill that it takes to kind of deliver that day in, day out, hour in, hour out. And I think it's amazing. If
you are filling in and you are starting to not hit those times, have you got producers screaming in your ear that we've got ad break coming up?
Yeah. You got, I mean, like Hosking will have, again, like people don't, like Hosking will be doing, he'll be speaking to time, so sometimes the ad breaks will crash in. Not all the time, but sometimes the ad breaks will crash in. So he will know at 6:20, 40 seconds, an ad break is going to start, whether he's talking or not. And he has to talk up to that point. And so sometimes he'll have that. Other times he'll know I have to fit in 3 ad breaks in this 40-minute stretch. I've got all of these interviews to get through. And when I'm in an ad break, that's the only time that we can patch in an interview with someone else. So while I'm in the ad break and while listeners are listening to an ad break for 2.5 minutes, I'm going to be doing another one of those interviews, and then we're going to stitch that in and play it so it all goes together live. Honestly, it's when you understand the mechanics of what goes into a really cohesive show, and you listen to it on air, and you know about all the shit that is happening behind the scenes. Again, say what you will about Hosking and his opinions, but as a broadcaster, I'm like, fuck that guy.
So he's a master of the trade, and it's backed up by the numbers. He absolutely crushes the readership or the listenership, whatever you want to call it. Do you judge your success based on that too? Like, are you married to the numbers? Do you know if you've done a good job based on the monthly figures that come in?
Yeah, it's funny, because the thing about ratings is a good day in the ratings never feels as good as a bad day feels bad. And I've got a real mixed relationship with ratings. I think as I get older, I've come to appreciate that the sky doesn't fall when they're bad, and you can they're really fickle, especially even the way we measure ratings in New Zealand is super fickle. So there's no point in in lashing yourself too much when they're bad. But it's hard, man. If like TV gets ratings every day. We get the ratings 7 days a week. At 9:30, I know I'm going to get an email that has the ratings for all the shows the day before. And I know when I get the consolidated ratings, when they've brought everything in, I'm going to get a color-coded one. And I know that if it's not red, that means we didn't win it. And if it's yellow, and if it's blue, then we're in real trouble. And, and it's hard not to wear that. I think, fortunately, I'm in jobs where the ratings are probably less. Like Hosking has to wear the ratings all the time, right? Fortunately for him, he's always winning them. But and I mean, I'm sure he would never say they get to him, but they would get to me. Put it that way. If I had to do that sort of job, or I was doing, if I was in prime time every single night, I would stress about the ratings. I find it hard not to, because it's the same sort of hollow feedback that you get from a like on social media. That's honestly the best. That's the best comparison. It's like you check your Instagram post and usually I'd expect 180 likes on this, but I've only got 120. It's pathetic, right? But you're like, fuck, man, my worth is so. I'm worth more than that. But it's hard not to seek validation in these really kind of trivial measures, and especially when it's so much money and prestige and opportunity comes down to the colour of that little box next to your TV show. Yeah.
I want to get into the family stuff back at the start, and I want to build through schooling Jack. In my mind, Jack Tame at school is a straight-A student. He's doing all the extracurricular. He's a head boy. You're nailing school. Accurate?
No, but I wasn't a bad student. I always think, so I'm one of four. My mum's a high school principal. My dad's a bit of a sort of Renaissance man, or likes to think of himself as one. I always think I'll never write a generation-defining album because I just had an awesome childhood. When people are like, oh yeah, school was shit, I had a shit time as when I was a kid, I'm just like, school was mint. I had a great time at school. I loved school. I loved my childhood. I was loved and supported and had every opportunity I could have hoped for. It was awesome. So when I was at school, and I mean, it was the same at home as it was at school, I was kind of like I am in broadcasting, kind of like I live my life now, jack of all trades, master of none, in that I never had a lunchtime free. I played the trombone, I did theatre sports, I did debating, I did drama, I did problem solving.
Smoke free Rock Quest.
I did Rock Quest. I was in a couple of ridiculous bands.
Jack of all trades, you might say.
Yes, exactly. Yes, very good. And I played rugby. I played football. I played cricket. I did so I just never. But I wasn't especially good at any of those. But I was fair to middling in most of them, and I just enjoyed them. And so I remember when I started high school, I did quite well. I mean, I don't know how much weight you can put in as a 13-year-old or whatever, right? But I was, I was a keen reader, and so we weren't really allowed to watch much TV at my house, so I did a lot of reading instead, and so shit like that probably put me in good stead for high school. But then I was just super lazy. When it came to class, I was so lazy. I had no interest in studying, no interest in trying. And this will shock you, but I was quite a late bloomer. And so my voice didn't drop until I was about like 17, I reckon. And I think maybe the immaturity extended beyond my pubic hair. I wasn't that interested in trying super hard, you know? I just kind of was like, I know what I got to do to get by. I'll do that, and I'll just enjoy all of the other things that school has. So I did well enough in school to, you know, go to uni and all that sort of thing. But I don't think, you know, I certainly wasn't on the honours board or anything like that. But I was involved in basically every group under the sun. Yeah.
I'm curious because it sounds a little bit similar to kind of my situation. But were you a 6 o'clock news watcher as a young man?
Funnily enough, I wasn't. Only because
Burst my bubble.
It annoyed me because I always wanted to watch 6 o'clock news and I wanted to watch Holmes, but my parents didn't let me watch the news until I was probably 16, and it was clear that I was interested in journalism. But I was, every morning I'd get up and I'd walk up our drive, get the newspaper, and then...
I thought you were going to say you'd watch ITV with Trevor McDonald.
No, I wish.
I did that.
Me and Dad would sit there and we would just trade different sections of the newspaper. And so I would just read the newspaper every morning for probably half an hour or something. And it's, you know, I never thought anything of it at the time, of course, but obviously looking back at it, I'm like, oh, that probably developed in me a bit of an interest in the world and news and politics and power and everything, yeah.
You've given me a little window there because I want to talk about your dad.
Yeah.
So I watched the Sunday story
yeah.
last night. Now, I'm going to try and summarize it, and then I want you
Yeah.
to pick up where it was. So your dad went tramping alone.
Yes.
Had a fall.
Went tramping alone in the middle of winter.
Went tramping alone in the middle of winter.
Mm-hmm.
In the evening, had a fall.
Mm-hmm.
Spent the night in the cold.
Mm-hmm.
Had some supplies.
Yep.
Then spent the whole day in the cold, hallucinating.
Mm-hmm.
And then the following morning set off his personal locator beacon and was eventually found by search and rescue. Now, that's a very short summary.
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah.
there's a lot of detail in there.
Yeah.
The part that I'm really interested in is the parallel while this is happening.
Yeah.
Your mum's in Auckland with you,
Yeah.
and you go live on Q&A not knowing where your dad is and if, let's not beat around the bush, if he's still alive.
Yeah. Yeah. That's 100% what happened.
So can we pick up from
I mean, yeah.
the morning of
Yeah.
having to do your job with this uncertainty in your head?
So it was actually even more convoluted than they went into on Sunday, in that my mum was in Auckland, my dad was due out of the bush. We didn't know he was missing. He was overdue, and I was going to dinner with my mum and my girlfriend, whom my mum had never met.
Oh.
And so it was the big, like, hey, mum, this is the girlfriend, this is mum. Everyone sits down, everyone gets to know each other a little bit. A lot of weight hanging on this evening, you know? And and then, of course, as I was walking to dinner, about half an hour, 20 minutes before I got to dinner, my mum texted me and said, I'm really worried your dad's not out of the bush. And so, yeah, it was lunacy, really, but we went to dinner and, like, sat down and we're like, so, right, how do you find Auckland then? And my poor mum was like, I could just see, she couldn't even make eye contact with my girlfriend. And my girlfriend, bless her, was like trying to fill the space, keep talking.
So was she oblivious to what was happening, the girlfriend?
No, I'd said, my dad's not out of the bush. And then after about 20 minutes, we all just said, this is absolutely hopeless. This is fucking crazy. Let's maybe try and do something about this. And so I left those two and started, I went outside the restaurant. I was like, you'll be right. Enjoy the hummus. And I went outside and started making calls to try and find my dad. And then the funny thing was that I got to, I don't know if you guys have ever sparked a major search and rescue operation.
No, I can't say that I have.
But this, so I got it all going, but it takes it's not, you don't just snap your fingers. Like there are various phone calls.
This is a dick question, but can you, as someone in your position, can you go, hey, it's Jack Tame here, I need to, is that?
No.
Okay, it was a genuine
question.
The craziest thing was, this is another thing they didn't get to in the story, but I was like, fuck, I don't know, because it was in the Kahurangi National Park, My dad was like, it was quite a remote area. And I didn't know it. It was just really dumb. We didn't really know much about the track, and there'd been a lot going on that week, and so Dad hadn't really made a plan. He hadn't told us what time he was likely to be out, so we just didn't have as much information as we should. I Googled the track from outside the restaurant. And there was it said, this track goes through this farmer's property. And so I called I was like, oh, there's a good place to start. And the All Blacks were playing, so I was like, oh, fuck, this.
That was in the story. That was in the story.
Yes, and I knew that the farmer would be watching the All Blacks, and I was like, whatever. So I called him, and someone answered the phone and said, oh, actually, sorry, I've sold the farm. I don't have the farm anymore. And I said, oh, okay, all good. And he said, well, why were you ringing? Are you going for a walk up there? And I was like, no, my dad's missing on the thing. And he goes, oh, well, I don't own the farm, but I am the head of search and rescue for the Nelson Tasman region. And I was like,
right, I couldn't connect the dots on the story on that.
It was this amazing kind of stroke of like this serendipitous moment.
Here
I was
we
like,
go.
you could be very useful. Yeah. And so I went home that night. We wrapped up dinner. We all decided that perhaps dinner wasn't going to work.
Who paid?
And I think I paid because I'm just that chivalrous, you know.
Yeah.
And so I went home and talked to the police and talked to search and rescue and organised the search. And it wasn't until about midnight that I realised that the cops rang me and they said, okay, no, we can't go in now. It's too late. It's too cold. It's too dark. It's too remote. We'll go in the morning, first light. We'll do it at 7:30. The sun's due up or whatever. We'll take the first helicopter up and see what we can see. And in the meantime, try and get some sleep. And I was like, oh, and then it was only about then that I was like, shit, I've got work in the morning. And I don't know, I just thought, well, I'm not going to be doing anything else. You know, I'm going to be stressing out. And so I just went to...
It's not the kind of job you can call in sick
No,
either,
you say,
is it?
you very likely say work in the morning. Work in the morning means filming live TV.
Filming live TV and interviewing various ministers and stuff. Yeah. So,
Yeah, so
it's the sort of thing where you probably have to be switched on. I mean, I probably could have got Chris Jack to do it.
Yeah.
But it was just one of those things where I was like, it almost seemed like the path of least resistance at that time. But then in the morning, and I checked the sunrise time because they said we'll go at first light. And I think the sun was rising at 7:30, and it was going to be a 25-minute helicopter flight to the area that he went missing. And so I thought, oh, well, if I go 25 minutes, 7:30, say they leave at 7:40, 25 minutes, 8:05, look around, they'll be back by 8:30 or whatever, and I won't even be on air. But then, of course, that's not quite how it works. You know, they took a wee while longer and stuff. So I was literally in the studio checking my phone in the ad breaks to see if the cops and search and rescue had called me. And fortunately, there was one other presenter in the building at the time who I kind of had a gentle word to. You know, we kind of just had if Jack's dad is dead, then you might have about 2 minutes. You might have about 2 minutes to come into the studio because he's probably not going to want to interview David Parker for 12 minutes afterwards. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Man, so many questions on that. Like, what's the elevation of the community? Like, how many of the crew cast? Like,
I told the director and I told my producer, who's those are the people in my ear, and I wasn't checking my messages when I was on. Like, I wasn't in the middle of an interview with my phone.
Yeah,
up,
of course,
right? So yeah. So I kind of had these little 1 or 2 minute breaks in which I could check. And I only checked it then, so that if something really did go bad, they could play ad breaks for a few minutes or whatever, and someone else could come in. But I also, the police didn't contact me for the whole show, so no, they didn't find him until a wee while later. So it wasn't until I got off air, and then was kind of dealing with it that I could kind of relax properly.
It's the mark of a true professional, being able to do your job. And with that going on, it sort of reminds me of the Chris Rock slap at the Oscars, being able to continue after something like that is happening. Probably a bad analogy.
No. I mean, another way to look at it is like I'm so obsessed with my job that I should have gone off air and just taken the day. I mean, I did wonder about it afterwards. I was like, fuck, why did I even... But the truth is, the night before when he was missing, I just kind of hadn't even really thought about the next day. You know, I was focusing on writing a list of all the things that he was carrying with him and getting recent photos of him and that kind of thing, that I just didn't even really think about the next morning. And it wasn't until it was late at night and I thought, oh, well, you know, it's me or no one else, that I decided to do it.
But it did have a happy ending. And
Yeah,
when
it did.
you find out?
Yeah.
When did you find
Shockingly,
out?
yeah.
How much longer until you found out he was okay?
I think at about, so we probably got off air at 10, and I think I got the final call that he was all good at about 11:15. So things happened pretty quickly after that. He was very lucky, although he actually he was in like pretty serious kind of organ failure mode by the end, and so he wasn't truly out of the woods for a few days. But I took him back on the tramp at Christmas. I thought, let's go and knock the bastard off, so to speak. And so I took him back up on a sunny day in summer with a group where everyone knew when we were, and we left, instead of leaving at midday for a 10-hour tramp like he'd done, we left at 7 o'clock in the morning. And it was really humbling because he was like, I think he realized, he really appreciated how close he was to carking it. Yeah, very lucky, eh?
It is very lucky. And it's kind of a nice soft seg into something I've been dying to talk about ever since your interview with Winston Peters, where he called you James about 10 times. It's getting rattled, or not getting rattled, but like things happening on live TV and having to rise above it. I remember watching that interview and I thought, first of all, you handled yourself so incredibly well. It was such entertaining viewing. But I was thinking, like, I'd love to talk to Jack about how he prepares for something like that. Like Winston Peters in particular, you're going to have such a prickly interview. It's going to get combative. Do you map out, we talked to Paddy Gower about how he was planning elections. Do you have little like stems of how things might go and what answers you might have to certain questions? Like how do you prepare for battle?
A mass murderer with their thing on the wall.
How do you prepare for battle with Winston Peters?
I mean, so that interview was funny because I have one regret about that. And that was that he said in the interview, you've stitched me up, you've got me on for, you've deceived me to get me on the show or whatever. And it's my contention that we absolutely didn't. That we were in an election campaign, and I've got these texts somewhere to prove it, but it was never worth kind of going into and relitigating because explaining is losing, right? But basically we texted him or texted his team and said, hey, will Winston come on the show this weekend? And they said, what do you want to talk? And we said, like, some vague term, like, campaign or the campaign strategy or something like that. And so he came on but I thought, Winston is obviously an entertaining character from a political perspective. Regardless of whether you agree with his politics, he's an incredibly charismatic and entertaining person. And I've had lots of really good interactions with him over the years. He's also someone who won't give you anything in an interview that he doesn't intend to give you. I've really only seen him properly rattled maybe once or twice if you include that interview. But I felt like going into that election that we in the media were perhaps holding him to a different standard than we would any other politician just because he was Winston. And that there were these really, really important questions to ask him about what for any other politician would have been an outrageous scandal, and that everyone was like, it's Winston being Winston. And I just thought, no, bugger it. I'm gonna go one by one. I'm just gonna go through them and just ask him directly. And I don't know, I've never spoken with him about what was going on that day. I suspect he just had a bad night and woke up on the wrong side of the bed or whatever and was pissed off and he struck me as being in a bad mood. I am quite good friends with Guy on Espiner, and he and I go jogging together quite a lot. And he's a real he really studies interviewing and really studies journalism. I don't know any journo who's more passionate about journalism, And he did this interview years ago where it's the only time I think Winston has truly been rattled in an interview. And I talked to Guyan about that the day before, and he just said, and he's so right, he just said, Winston always throws you these little, it's like Hansel and Gretel being thrown these little breadcrumbs that as an interviewer lead you off piste. It's really easy to be distracted from the stuff that you're trying to get out of him or the questions that you're trying to put to him, because he'll say something casually, seemingly casually, that will lead you off into another area. And just don't get distracted. Just don't get distracted by that. So when he called me James, I was like, I'm not going to react to that.
You're acknowledging it straight away? Like, I said,
my name's Jack, but then I said, I'm not going to say anything more after that. I'm just going to go. I'm just going to keep on asking these questions. I'm not going to take any of the little breadcrumbs that have been thrown, deliberately or otherwise, and get distracted. And so that was my strategy for that.
And he kept hammering his strategy.
Yeah,
Was
he
"I'm gonna
kept on
keep
doing
throwing
his
out
thing,
James,
and I mean,
he's
look,
gonna keep ignoring it.
It made for good TV. I don't know how much we learnt from the exchange necessarily. but
The James Tame at the end.
that
was amazing.
Yeah. It was funny. We've had interviews since. I thought he wouldn't. He didn't. He refused to come on for a little bit after that. But we've had interviews since, and everything seems to be good now. So hopefully, we'll let the past be the past.
Q&A is quite unique in that you get a long interview with
Yeah.
very high-profile people. What is the interview strategy? Because it's part having good questions prepared and part active listening, right? You've got to be listening to what they're saying and ready to respond to it. But you've also got to condense it into 10 minutes, like a tight 10 minutes.
The funny thing is, I mean, first of all, 10 minutes to a lot of people listening won't sound like much. 10 minutes in like normal broadcasting is a massive amount of time for an interview. Like if you're watching morning TV or listening to Hosking or Morning Report or whatever, most interviews are 3 minutes. I mean, Hosking will do interviews that are 2 questions, and that's it. And so, 10 minutes sounds like a lot, but it's actually not a massive luxury. That's probably, for a politician in New Zealand, that's probably 8 questions, which is nothing. Because every senior politician is trained to within an inch of their life for soaking up time. I mean, there's no better proponent than the Prime Minister. And I'm not saying she's a bad interviewee or anything. I'm just saying, if you study interviews with Jacinda Ardern, she just soaks up the time. That's what she does. She's let me give you some context here, and just plays for time all the time. And it's very effective. So I change the strategy going into interviews. First of all, I try and know the subject matter as well as I can without being too bogged down in the details. And there is a danger sometimes that you can get so deep in something that actually no one knows what the fuck you're talking about.
Like Worldle?
Like Worldle, exactly. Like Worldle is a prime example. That should have been a 30-second bit and it turned into 8 minutes, I didn't finish it.
Still haven't got it.
We'll get there. Is it Albanian? No, it's not Albanian. Okay, no, okay. Okay. Is it Northern Macedonia?
He's rattled.
Is
We've
it
rattled him.
Is it Northern Macedonia?
It's not Northern Macedonia.
Fuck. Okay, I'm in trouble. Anyway.
James.
So I often go in with too many questions, and I'm often culling questions as I go because I'm getting timing in my ear. And it's a challenge because you're getting timing in your ear, but you're also trying to listen. And it's an interesting point you picked up on, and you guys have obviously developed this skill really well. If you are live broadcasting and you know a few 100,000 people or 1 million people are watching you or listening to you at any one time.
No, you've seen our numbers.
It is incredible. It is super difficult to listen to what someone is saying because you are thinking about the next question and not wanting to look like an idiot. And the mark of a really, really skillful interviewer is someone who has the confidence in a live, high-pressure interview to listen to what their interviewee is saying. And I'm not there 100% of the time yet, but I'm there much more than I used to be because I'm fortunate to have had a lot of experience in it now. And I just think, like for any young reporter or young journo starting out, I always just say your question is important. Listening to the answer is far more important. And what I try and do is I'm quite happy to go into an interview with, say, a 12-minute interview. I'm quite happy to go in with 6 questions if I'm feeling confident that I'm just going to listen and be able to pick up on things. And it's not until you've actually got the confidence to listen to someone's answer that you know whether or not they've answered the question. And I see my job on Q&A, especially with a lot of politicians, as not just asking the questions, but seeking the answers. And that's a distinction that doesn't necessarily exist in other interview formats. Like, if someone doesn't answer my question, I want to be able to say, you haven't answered the question, I'm going to ask it again. If they don't answer at that time, I want to say, you haven't answered the question, I'm going to ask it again. And go back and back and back if I need to. And then if we get to a point where we're just going around in circles, I'll say, look, I've given you 4 opportunities, you haven't answered the question, I'm going to move on.
And that makes such a strong point. And
It
those are
does.
the most memorable
Yeah,
interviews.
yeah.
They're clearly evading the question.
Yeah.
Right, point made.
And that's perhaps the only sort of, defence that we as interviewers have against politicians who are really effective at running the pot.
You made the point about knowing what goes on behind the scenes with Hosking, particularly with his radio show. Now, as an audience, we see you front and centre, right? But how much of the preparation and how much of the workload is shared by the team behind the scenes?
Yeah, quite a lot. Although for a show like Q&A, it's a pretty small team.
Right.
So for the most part, we have, like we would have one meeting a week with our whole team. It's probably 6 of us, but several of those people will only be working part-time. And then we would kind of talk through the ideas for the week. We have one of our producers does a lot of chasing, so just hits the phones and tries to get people and kind of does the logistics of setting them up. And then sometimes it takes a bit of there's a lot of politicking behind the show, so there's a lot of negotiating with people about when they'll come on. Because the thing is, if you're a politician, there aren't many upsides to coming on hey, get up, ruin your Saturday night because you've got to prepare for an interview. Yeah. Get up early on a Sunday morning for a show that only really political nerds are watching. That if you do really well, a few of your supporters will send out a tweet saying great job, but if you fuck it up, then everyone's going to clip you up on Twitter and put it everywhere. There aren't massive upsides to that. Fortunately, in New Zealand, a credit to our MPs is that most of them are pretty accessible, but sometimes it does take negotiating. So we only get certain numbers of interviews with the top ministers every year. We only get certain numbers of interviews with the Prime Minister. We only get certain numbers of interviews with the Leader of the Opposition every year. That's just how it is. And so you got to. So a big part of my job and my executive producer's job is kind of going to those negotiations. But then he and I will sit back and have a kōrero about what we think are the most important subjects, and then we'll often go away, research them ourselves, then come back and we'll both write a question line, and then we will debate with each other what we think are the questions that should be in there and what shouldn't be, what are the subjects that shouldn't be in there and shouldn't be, how that person, if we've got time, we'll gameplay it, how that person might answer that, when we move on, when we don't move on, and then he'll be in my ear when I'm doing an interview, and he'll just say, he'll give me the timings, and then he'll say move on, if he's bored or whatever. But it's definitely a team thing. But I mean, for a show like Q&A, I would write the show, and then me and one other person would work out the question lines. Really, yeah.
Is the mark of a good interview how many Herald or Stuff articles get written about it? The one you had with Louisa Wall was obviously huge. You did a great interview with Andrew Costa, the Winston Peters stuff. If you're seeing it talked about a lot, does that mean you've nailed it?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, that is a measure of success, I suppose. But I think I don't want to get too high and lofty about it, but I do think our show probably performs a really important democratic function in that so much of the news we consume is really snackable. Do you guys get notifications on your phone? Yeah, so I turn them off because I just can't stand it. I can't stand just getting a headline about news every day.
That's what Stephen does for a living.
Yeah, I mean, it's grueling, right?
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
You do a great job. Let me say. But it's so much of news is the 24-hour news cycle. There's always some outrage. There's always something. There's always some red flashing banner, and so I think I like to think we fulfill an important democratic function in that we go into things in a little bit more depth than other programs might do, and we maybe test politicians more than others might do at times. So I would extend the parameters by which we measure success beyond just do we have follows or have we created outrage, because that isn't the goal. But I would say, has the audience learned something? Have we tested someone, and have we held someone to account? Because the thing that gets up my goat more than anything else in politics is hypocrisy, and there's so much of it. I really think it's the job of our show and shows like ours to try and expose hypocrisy sometimes.
So then, cameras are off.
Yeah.
You finish the show.
Yeah.
Do you then is then a measure of success stepping away from it and going, fuck yeah, we nailed that? And then you racked up for the rest of your Sunday as well.
It's funny, yeah. I do get super pumped up doing broadcasting generally is just you use a massive amount of energy. I'm sure you guys notice this as well. I always think you use. So I did breakfast for a few years, and one of the things I hated about it was that I felt like I would do 3 hours on TV live every morning, and then I felt like all of my social energy, all of my communicative energy for the day was spent. And so when I went home to my girlfriend at the time, I was like, I don't want to talk. I don't want to call my mum. I don't want to see my friends. I just wanted to be in a black cave and just block out the world. And this is one of the things for someone like Hosking, you know, I just know the energy that is required to do those kind of shows. And so I think it's amazing that people can sustain that and not be completely depleted of all of that kind of social energy. And so I still find it when I broadcast now, I come off air, I've still got adrenaline pumping. And, like the first time I ever did, I think I did read the 6 o'clock news, for a couple of weeks, years ago. I was probably like in my mid-20s or something. And I was so pumped up when I came off air that I would just go and like smash 2 bags of lollies and a block of chocolate and half a scoop, like a massive thing of ice cream.
This guy knows how to celebrate.
Yeah, and I'd be like, every night I'd be like, and then I'd just have a huge crash. Yeah. And then the next day I'd just do it again. Yeah. And it was like being a drug addict in a way, I was just like, I would just come off and have all this energy. And so these days I'm probably getting a bit older and maybe don't get the same kick out of it. But the funny thing is I'm a really poor judge of what is a good interview. I can tell in the moment sometimes if it's good, sometimes it's bad, but I often come out of an interview thinking, oh, that was shit. And then my producer will go, nah, man, it was good. And I'll be like, you just saying that, bro.
We've
and
had
then,
so many of those conversations. Every drive
that's the
back
drive
to
home.
Hamilton.
That's the drive back to
How
Hamilton.
did we get there?
And then again,
100%.
it's like the fickle measures by which we get validation, and then
so
and then I'll go back and watch it, or I'll get all these messages from people saying that was a really good interview, and I'll think, oh,
That's
thanks, that's
the feedback loop.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly what we
Yeah.
go through
Yeah.
every week.
Yeah.
That's triggered one little question, and we're going to move on to the US.
Yeah, sure.
When you were in school, you were on TV, right? You were on like breakfast TV as a 17-year-old.
That was when I was studying.
When you were studying.
Yeah. So
we're talking about that sort of that feedback. Were you a bit of a big dog on campus? Were people like, this guy's on TV, and here he is.
Here he is.
Hello, ladies. No,
Hello,
I mean, yeah, exactly. Honestly, you should see my photo from when I started studying. It's just like I look like I'm 14 years old. I was like 18 or something, and it's like so embarrassing. Although I always think youth is nothing to be wished away.
Kind of Jonah Hill vibes about you.
Is
Back then.
that? Oh yeah, there was. Yeah, no, I was a bit.
Oh, I meant just the hair.
Oh,
I'm not
okay.
going to go.
No,
I'm not
so-
going to body shame you. I'm just going the hair. The hair.
I mean, you can shame me on all fronts, really. I was a bit of a mess, but I think I went and did. Yeah, I was maybe on TV in the mornings and then came to school. I don't think I was never a big dog. And I was certainly never popular with girls or anything. But I probably
Rolling in your like Corolla. Just
yeah. No, do you know what I had? It was my first car. It was a 1989 red Honda City.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever driven a Honda City.
Little hatchback number.
Oh, it's a thing of beauty. It's just like driving a go-kart.
Mm.
That's what it's like. And it was
Was that the one
it was
you
like
did
a
the gag with the tank crushed it?
No. That was a very similar car. I'd actually
Is that the square, like kind of very square,
very
boxy
square,
number?
very square, very boxy, very dangerous. The wheel would
Yeah.
shake at about 90 k's an hour.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't super popular with the ladies then or ever. But I was so again, how I was saying I did benefit from these kind of amazing little moments of good fortune. I got, as part of my project when I was studying, I was reading the news on CTV for a couple of weeks and doing stories like news stories or sports. I was doing a lot of sports stories all the time for CTV. And TVNZ saw me, and my tutor at the time worked at TVNZ as well, and just said, hey, this guy's pretty confident on camera and seems to have the goods and is a hard worker and stuff. And so they just called me out of the blue one day and said, literally at 5 p.m. and said, can you come in for an interview for a job tomorrow morning at 8:30? And I did. And then they called me that afternoon and said, we'll give you a job while you study, and then as soon as you finish studying, we'll give you an internship, and then that'll probably give you a job as well. So I thought, it was just this amazing kind of good fortune. Yeah.
So fast forward, do sort of 5 or 6 years of
Yeah.
impressing the right people. You're doing well. People are starting to notice you, And then at 24, we're sort of mixing up the timelines a little bit here. But before, obviously, the Newstalk ZB job, you were the US correspondent at 24.
Yeah.
Is that? I'm assuming that's the youngest that anyone's ever done it. Was that a big call at that time?
Yeah, well, I mean, it for who? It was, I guess, for TVNZ. It was. I'd been a reporter I started reporting for TVNZ when I was 19, which is just an outrage. Like, I mean,
I'm thinking about 19-year-old me.
Yeah, it was young and cheap, and I was young and cheap. But the great thing was that was when TV had money. I remember my first or second summer that I was a 6 o'clock reporter for the news. I was put in charge for a few days. I was put in charge of the South Island, like covering the South Island. And I remember, like, cool as you like, calling up and ordering helicopters to like fly around places and to like pick me up and take me to the West Coast and all this shit, and just being like, yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, big dog.
Like, yeah, that's when I felt like a big dog. Yeah. And I mean, those days are long past us, sadly. So I'd been a reporter for a few years, and I'd kind of done my time, in the trenches a little bit. Because I'd started young, I'd done 4 or 5 years, and when I'd gone to America on holiday with Big Bad Matty McLean, I don't know if you, and when I was in the States, I had seen Tim Wilson, who was TVNZ's first US correspondent in New York.
Did he have a bow tie on at the time?
Yeah, it was pre-bow tie Tim.
Yeah.
It was, but he was like, yeah,
real niche.
Yeah,
New Zealand
a
media.
real
knowledge.
niche look. Yeah,
Dug it out.
and so when I was there, I was quite nerdy, and so I'd asked him if I could go and hang out and see how he did the job and all that sort of thing. I loved New York, and I loved how he was doing the job, and I just thought this would be so sweet. And so and then Michael Jackson died when I was over there, and so I went, and I happened to be in LA, and so I went and saw him and helped him out a little bit when he was covering Michael Jackson's death. Bad for Michael, good for me. And
Sliding doors.
exactly. Came back to New Zealand, and Tim rang me and said, "Hey, a year or two later or whatever," and said, "Hey, I'm going to quit. I'm ready to move back to New Zealand. I'm done. I want to live a different life now. You should come and do this job." And I thought, oh, no one's going to want the job. For a couple of, well, I thought no one's going to hire me for the job. But there are a couple of things in my favour. Number one, he's a contractor, not a staff member. He's a contractor, and I don't know how enticing that's going to be for people, especially if they've got families and that sort of thing. Move across the world, you don't know how much you're going to get paid, don't know how much you're going to earn. In the nature of news, you never know if it's going to be a busy month, quiet month, whatever. And he said, but you should go for it. I'm going to call the head of news at TVNZ, and I'm going to tell him that I'm quitting, and then I'm going to text you when he's done, as soon as I'm off the phone. And if you want to do something, you should go and do it then. And so he had this conversation. He texted me and said, I'm off. I've just hung up on the head of news. I've told him I'm resigning in 3 months or whatever. And I literally knocked on the door.
Wow.
He said, yeah, come in. And I said, I hear there's a job going to New York.
Wow.
It was literally like that. And he was immediately started smiling. And he said, oh, okay, you're right. And you're not going to believe me when I say this, but to the best of my knowledge, no one else wanted the job. When they sent me, no one else wanted it because of the whole contract situation. I was 24, I was single, I had nothing to lose. And when I went over there, Tim, and he would be the first to admit this, was hopeless with technology. Because I was, maybe a little more technically capable than Tim, I was like, this guy should buy a camera. Whoever's got their job should buy a camera, they should buy a tripod, they should spend a bit of money, set up, and they should get microphones and all that sort of stuff, and they should film as much of their own stuff as they can. And so that's what I did. And TVNZ basically had a fixed budget for America, but with Tim, they'd been spending money on Tim and a cameraman who costs $1,200 a day. But with me, 70% of the stories they could do, I would film myself. And so I could, by the breakdown of the contract, I could just do more stories and be on TV more than perhaps other people would have been able to with those same if they weren't filming it for themselves. So I travelled to 40 states, and I was basically just my own boss. I could pitch any story, hope for the best, and be away.
And there were some big stories while you were there,
I mean,
right?
it was amazing. I did. I was there for Obama's second election, although cruelly TVNZ made me cover Mitt Romney I don't know if you remember that. Yeah, so that was rough. Yeah, that was rough. But never mind. We will forgive and forget. I was at the gates of Sandy Hook the night of the massacre. So I remember them. I remember the families outside Sandy Hook being supported and going off to their houses. I remember all the memorials and everything there. I did the Hurricane Sandy, which was about the same time, which kind of completely, fucked up the Northeast. In fact, I had this amazing experience in Hurricane Sandy when, in the eye of the hurricane, I was in our little studio that we sometimes broadcast live out of in New York back to New Zealand. It was on 31st Street in New York, in Manhattan, and the power went out below 33rd Street. So it got completely wiped out. The whole of lower Manhattan was plunged into darkness in the eye of this hurricane. And I went out with my backpack and my camera. I'd wrapped it in a couple of plastic bags. I put condoms over the mics, because that's what you do. And I went out and was wading through shin-deep water on 5th Avenue. And 5th Avenue was just completely dark, completely black. And I was just in the eye of a hurricane, standing on 5th Avenue, the only human being you could see in any distance. It was this incredible experience. So I did that. I went to Guantanamo Bay. I spent, days in Guantanamo Bay. I filmed the prisoners in Gitmo. I went to the 50th Super Bowl.
Which one was that one?
It was when Peyton Manning lost.
Oh.
The Broncos lost. It was in San Francisco. I went to, I went to however many Donald Trump rallies over the years. I covered the Pulse nightclub shooting. I don't know if you remember that one. That was about 50 odd people. I did a lot of massacres. Yeah, I did heaps of them.
On the Trump stuff, when you go to something like that, is the goal to try to do you have to try to get a little clip of him talking to you? Like, does he walk past and you try to do you think about what's the best question he's going to respond to?
And I mean, Paddy Gower's the master of this. The key is just to not only do you want to get a question, Paddy will just always go for a New Zealand themed question, basically what's your message to the people of New Zealand? And it's always
Wasn't it I love your golf courses?
Yeah, that's what Trump said. Yeah. It was hard when I was doing that by myself. So getting access like that without a camera person is super hard. And so I struggled sometimes sometimes I got amazing. The funny thing was I could go, you call up, right? Sometimes it made sense to play down how small and insignificant New Zealand was in the context of New York media, or American media. So I would call places up and I'd go, can we do this interview? Honestly, it's nothing. We're New Zealand. It's never going to be broadcast in America. It's nothing. You don't need to worry about us. It'd be really casual. And so people would let their guard down. And then other times I would call up and I'd be like, we are the top rating broadcaster in New Zealand. People would be like, the top rating? I'd be like, yep, the number one, and you could kind of use that in your favor. And I mean, watching the Trump stuff was amazing to watch it unfold. And I'll be the first to concede that I didn't think he would win. I was with Hillary Clinton on election night. I've been with.
What does that mean?
I mean
with Hillary Clinton.
Well, I was at the Hillary Clinton victory event.
Okay, all right.
Which was a very somber place to be. So I covered I did Mitt Romney one year. I did Hillary Clinton. The last election I did Joe Biden. But Joe Biden won, but you remember he didn't win on election night. It took a few days for him to work it out. So again, it was like, ugh. But it was it was an amazing period to be in America, because I was there as perhaps the fabric of unity was kind of ripped for everyone to see. I'm sure it had been tearing for some time, but the fabric of political unity across the country was ripped in the most dramatic fashion.
And how did that manifest itself in day-to-day America that you saw when you weren't working?
Well, what was extraordinary to me was I have had and have friends who are fervent Trump supporters. And, I thought... I mean, I don't know how deep you guys want to go on this, because I still love American politics. But I think if you grew up in the Midwest in the US, as tens of millions of people do, if you grew up in the Rust Belt, you grew up in states that enrich themselves through manufacturing, and you're a baby boomer, say you were born in the post-war years, you grew up in this period of incredible prosperity in America, right? And it's human nature to expect that you will have a higher standard of living than your parents. Like, we all kind of think that now, right? I think about when I was a kid, we never ate at restaurants. My parents would never buy a coffee. And now, just through progress or economic development or whatever, you kind of take some of those things for granted, right? The same thing applies. So you had this group of people, tens of millions of people, who grew up in the Midwest, in particular, in those Rust Belt states, whose parents built stuff. Maybe their parents didn't have a college education, but they had a high school education, and dad was the foreman in a factory. He got 4 weeks paid vacation every year. He could afford a house in the suburbs, 2 cars, healthcare, happy days. Everyone was having a great life. And so that was the baseline expectation for a lot of those people in those states. They thought, even if I don't have a college education, that's the kind of existence I can expect to have as part of the American middle class. And after those free trade agreements were signed, particularly the one in 94, NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, so much of American manufacturing moved overseas. And those states, which don't have much media coverage and which don't have big important universities and thus don't have the mainstream thought-leading elites, were gutted. They had all of those good jobs taken out of them. So now, if you were someone who grew up in the 60s, saw your dad with that good job and your parents with a vacation home and all that stuff in, rural Ohio, if you have the same level of education as your parents, what's the best job you can have today? Working at 7-Eleven? Working at Walmart? Maybe you're lucky to have health care. You probably don't. You've probably got diabetes. You might have had an oxycodone, dependency at some point. Is it any wonder that those people rebelled? I think looking at it now with a wider lens, it's totally understandable. The thing that surprised me was that even in New York, I hadn't seen it coming. So I have friends who are well-educated people working in, like big dog jobs in New York, who are big Trump fans because of the media they consume. I think they listen to a lot of like sports talk radio from rural from rural Massachusetts, where they're from. All their friends are Trump supporters, and that's it. Once they're in their bubble, once they've chosen their team, once they've got their tribe, there's no changing anyone's mind. And that probably works for both sides. It works for the Dems, it works for the Republicans. I think the Trump phenomenon is really easy to understand why lots of people feel betrayed by the system, because they felt like they kind of had this promise of a middle class existence. It got taken away from them, and all the time it got taken away from them, the media said, life's great, life's awesome, look at us in New York and Washington and Boston and wherever else, we're living a great life, everyone's prosperous. But actually people in those states weren't.
It's the best explanation of American politics I think I've ever heard.
I kind of think that like when you were a grandparent, when you get really old and you'll look back and tell stories of the Trump era, like it will be such an incredible story to tell, and you being there at the heart of it.
I remember I was at Gin Wigmore's house randomly filming a story, and I had to do a cross to Hosking, and I remember it was the day after Trump had declared he was gonna run, and he had slagged off John McCain, the Arizona senator who was a Republican candidate for for president with Sarah Palin. Remember him? And he was an amazing guy because he was a staunch conservative, staunch Republican, but he was quite a dignified man. And so, for example,
he was a war veteran.
He was a war. So he was in Vietnam. Not only was he in Vietnam, he was in the Hanoi Hilton, the prisoner of war camp in Hanoi. I think he got shot down in Hanoi. Was dragged out of the plane completely fucked up. He was totally crippled and he had his broken legs and broken arm and things. To the day of his death, he couldn't put on a shirt by himself because he couldn't lift his hands above his head. And he was taken to this prisoner of war camp. His dad was a senator. And the Vietnamese said, we'll send you back to America. Your dad's an important dude. And he refused to be sent back until every single prisoner of war before him, who'd come into the camp before him, was sent back. So he was kind of this paragon of, this American hero. I remember in the debates, he said to Obama, someone stood up at a town hall debate and said, why is Obama, he's the epitome of evil, da, 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 da. We all know how Trump would react to that, right? But John McCain goes, no ma'am, I'm going to have to stop you there. I don't believe Obama is evil. I think he's a great God-fearing man. He wants the best for our country. We just have different beliefs on how to achieve that. And that would never happen today, right? So anyway, Trump came out. It was day 2 or 3 of his since announcing that he wanted to run for president, and he said, "I don't like John McCain. I prefer war heroes who weren't captured." And it was like, I was like, campaign over. Like, that is an unforgivable. I was like, and there we go. It's all done.
Yeah.
And then of course it just spiraled from that point. I mean, there were just these incredible moments that you thought were unsurvivable. The Access Hollywood tape. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing. Any other politician, if they were held to the same standards, would never have got away from that. But I think there is such a hunger within certain sectors of America to just fucking tear the system down because the system has not. They've been told the system's working for them, and it's not. It's not. They're living a shitty life, and people are understandably angry about that, and it manifests in candidates like Trump.
But it's kind of a culture of celebrity as well, right? Like and you during your time there, you would have brushed shoulders with a lot of celebrities and a lot of famous people.
Yeah, I always had to do those movie junkets. Those, I went to the Oscars like 5 times, and part of me loved it, part of me hated it because people thought they were so important and cool and all that. But
does that mean going to the Oscars, you're going by yourself, you're all dressed up,
and
you're not really, you
don't
know anyone else there?
Okay,
Are you just in the media scrum?
Yeah, it's not like, like Jack, Leonardo wants
Who
to
are you wearing?
catch up with you.
Alan
Yeah.
Steins.
No, it's not like that. It's not like that. It's very much like you pay however many $1,000s for tiny windows on the red carpet.
Oh wow!
in which you
pay.
Oh yeah, because we'd like pay to the broadcasters.
Right,
So
wow.
TVNZ would have to pay, I think maybe $1,500, $2,000 or something for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, and you'd have to like hit your slot. And you got to walk in. You walk straight in. You put your little One News cube. There's a French guy who's talking before you, or an Uzbek journalist who's doing a cross. I remember one
I see
time
what you're
there
trying to do here. Neither of those two are in the word. They're not the Worldle. I see what you're trying to do here.
This is maybe the first Worldle I've really found on, and the grandest stage as well. I remember one time there was a famous Mexican puppet was on before me. So it was like a ventriloquist and his kind of puppet doll thing was on before
I remember
me.
that.
Yeah, and so but I would like run on, and then they're like, okay, New Zealand's up, go. You're just gonna get your microphone, and you're on. And you're immediately like, yeah, here I am on the red carpet, like, schmoozing with all the celebs. There's no prospect for a shit kicker like you to go and hang out with the cool guys.
You would have turned a few heads though, because you were Elle magazine's most eligible bachelor, number 41 at the time.
Yeah, and anyone who like scrutinized that list a little more closely would notice that the author of that list was a very good friend of mine who happened to be from New Zealand, and that the Elle 50 most eligible bachelors seem to include about 35 expat New Zealanders who are living in New York. I got like a lot of messages though.
What sort of messages?
Well, just like women and being like, hey, I live in North Dakota and like I've read your thing and like if you ever,
Wow.
Did you get the same?
Girl in every port.
Did you get the same sort of feedback when you were in the 2013 most sexy news presenter?
Oh, do you know? Where did you dig that up?
Don't worry
That's
about us.
serious.
Don't worry about us. Don't worry about our team of 2.
That's very. You guys should join our team. Jeez, we could do with you on Q&A. I still have the pink sash that Durex sent me. They presented me with a sash saying sexiest. Whatever. What was it?
Was it sexiest news presenter or sexiest?
I think it was.
Person?
I want to say
Sexiest
it was
man.
broader than that. I want to say it was
man.
sexiest TV personality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2013.
So I don't want to.
25.
I'm sure if they did some IP address analysis there might be some concerning results.
But so Stephen and I, there's contention between us because I read that you flirted with Miley Cyrus, whereas Stephen's got it
I
as
had it on good authority. It was Anne Hathaway.
It was both.
Yeah.
No, I just had
Nice.
this terrible thing where I would
Nice.
just become. I don't know, and I wouldn't. It was like when you do an interview and you don't know how well you've done. I would do an interview and I was like, oh, I definitely wasn't flirting. And then I'd get back and I'd be like, fuck, this is shameless. This is borderline problematic. Like this is gonna be an issue. And it was just that I don't know what you get 3 minutes with these people, right? Maybe I think I had about 25 minutes with Miley Cyrus actually, but most of the time when you do a movie star, you get about 3 minutes with them. And you'll maybe interview 40 for the day. And so I would always try and make a connection that differentiated me from the other journos.
Worldle.
Exactly, something like that. So, but I would go in and I would say, I would often go in and because a lot of the people who do those things, just like they're desperate to be on the, they're kind of leeches on the celebrity,
Jock sniffers, we call them in the
exactly.
sporting realm.
It's just, and you're like, oh my God, have some dignity. They'll go in and they'll say, oh my God, you're amazing, and will you sign this for me, whatever. And I just wasn't into that at all. And so I wasn't really into
hard to get.
Yeah, exactly. But I would go in and I'd be like, hi guys, I'm Jack. I'm from New Zealand. I know you don't want to be here. I can only assure you that, this isn't going to be great fun for me, but why don't we try and do something? I'll give you a word each, and you've got to try and slip that into your answer, right?
Nice.
So I'd say, right, Anne Hathaway, octopus. You've got to try and slip octopus into this.
Nice.
Okay? And they'd be like, right, you're rolling. And I'd be like, Les Miserables, great film, loved it. And tell me about your character or whatever. And she'd be like, yeah, I felt like I was being pulled in all sorts of different directions, and at times I just had to, crunch up a little octopus or whatever, and I'd be like, oh, yeah, Anne Hathaway. I remember I said to Rihanna, as in Riri,
Yeah.
I was
I
like,
know
yeah,
Rihanna.
it was like the T20 World Cup was on, and because she's from Barbados, right, I was like, yo, what do you think of Gale opening the batting at the moment? He said last night he scored 60 off 22 or whatever, and she was like, you're a cricket fan, right? And I was like, yeah, I dabble a little bit, Riri, just totally shameless.
It's
Yeah.
gold.
So what did you open with Sir David Attenborough?
Oh, that was crazy. That was a life highlight. Sometimes they get me to go and speak to universities, and the kids and the students will say, "Oh, what's your like best interview?" And I'm like, "Well, it's
Kermit the
probably
Frog,
Sorry, I didn't mean for that to sound nearly as patronising as it was. No. It was they'd say right,
down the stairs, there's a stair. Sorry.
They'd say, and I'd say it was the time I was in Antarctica. I spent the day. I had a helicopter. I flew from the McMurdo Dry Valleys, which is the biggest area without ice in Antarctica. Obviously, think of Antarctica as being white. It's not all white. And then I flew to a penguin colony with 180,000 penguins, and I just lay in the penguins. And then I flew back to base, and I shared a bottle of wine with Sir David Attenborough as we looked out over whales breaking through the sea ice in front of us. It's pretty hard to beat that, So he was filming one of his things in Antarctica when I was there randomly, and there was this big sort of hubbub at Scott Base. They said, "Oh my God, David Attenborough's coming for dinner. He's going to come. He's been staying at McMurdo Station, and McMurdo Station, the American base, is about 2 or 3 k's from the New Zealand base, just over a little hill." And they said he's coming. He's been staying at McMurdo, but we're going to bring him into Scott Base. We're going to make him dinner. That's it. And so he came over, and he was in the New Zealand bar at Scott Base. I don't know if it's still the case, but when I went, everything was $2. So you want a beer, $2. You want a wine, $2. You want a Coke, $2. Everything's $2. And he was standing there holding court, talking to, and everyone was just sort of hanging on his every word. And he had these producers with him from the BBC. And I walked up to them, and I did the whole, "Hi, excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you. My name's Jack, and I'm a reporter from New Zealand, and I work for TVNZ, and we're the state broadcaster, and now the BBC is out, we've got an affiliation, and do you think Sir David might possibly have a couple of minutes for me to..." And the guy goes, "I don't know, just ask him." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And so I went up and just said, "Hey, can I, could we have a minute? Could I steal you for an interview?" And he goes, "Well, why don't I bring this bottle of wine?" And I was like, "Why don't you then?"
Yeah.
And so we went and sat down in Scott Base, and I remember thinking, like, what the fuck am I going to ask David Attenborough? And I had like 3 minutes to prepare or whatever, right? So, I asked him about climate change.
And he'd be really good at getting octopus in.
Yeah, he would. That was not a challenge for him. But he, and then I think I asked him who would win in a fight between a bear and a lion or something,
Good question.
Yeah, he did a bear. And it was just this kind of amazing little life highlight. And then I flew back on the same plane with him, and had to go and take him his lunch. The Scott Base cooks made him this big packed lunch for the plane, so I had to go and on the plane drop off Sir David Attenborough's lunch to him, which was just surreal, amazing, eh?
But yeah, absolutely. Before we leave Antarctica, 2 niche questions. One, the penguin colony? Did it stink?
So bad. Okay, interesting that you raise that.
Are you a big
Because-
penguin? Where's that question come from?
No,
I'm a big
because-
wildlife guy.
No, I
There's
remember-
lots
I
of layers
remember-
to me, Steve.
That is the thing that to this day I remember the most. Because you think, oh my God, 200,000 penguins, 150,000 penguins, that'll be so cute. And there's an element of cuteness. But the thing is, like, those penguins are all eating fish.
Mm.
And they're all shitting where they live. And also, with 150 or 200,000 living penguins, there are a lot of dead penguins. And stuff in Antarctica doesn't deteriorate very quickly because it's so cold. And so there's sort of like dead carcasses being picked at by skewers everywhere, and then everything smells like fishy shit. And you're like, it's not really that nice. But it was an amazing thing, amazing to see it. But the smell, I think, like curled my ears. It was pretty rough.
Because that's the 7th continent, right? You've been to all the other ones.
All of them.
Where was that on
Never
the...
to sub-Saharan Africa though.
Oh, well, there's still time.
Embarrassing. Yeah. Where was that on the
Yeah,
on
in
the
terms
list?
of the rank, did you hit that one earlier than others?
Yeah, no, I did. My last continent that I reached was Africa, and it was only I was having I have like 2 very nerdy mates from high school with whom we kind of have geography-related contests and play Worldle. I'm not going to be telling them about this. And they, we had a contest between the 3 of us to see who could get to the continents first. And in order to get to them first, after I'd been to Antarctica, I knew it was mine for the taking. So I deliberately flew to Morocco, like to this huge dog leg trip to spend 3 days in Morocco or something, so that I could tick it off. But we also did things like we went to our Antipode. Do you know what that is? It's when you if you drill directly through the middle of the earth, where you pop up on the other side of the world. Right? So if you did it from Auckland or I think from Hamilton, you'd just end up in the ocean. Most places, because 2/3 of the world is ocean, end up in the ocean. But Christchurch is one of the few places on earth that has a land-based Antipode. It's this town called Foz in the north of Spain. And so we worked out the exact coordinates of the hospital in which we were born in Christchurch, flipped them, and then travelled to the exact inverted coordinates in the north of Spain. And then I had a mate in Christchurch who got up in the middle of the night, got a piece of bread, and I got a piece of bread in the north of Spain, and we both took a photo, and so we made a world sandwich at the time.
It's nice.
And it's funny because if you think about it, the space shuttle flies at, what, like 150 k's, I think, above the Earth, or maybe 300 k's, I can't remember. But provided the space shuttle isn't directly above you, you are further away from any other human being on the face of the Earth from your home. Kind of interesting.
Just gonna let that one sit.
Yeah, profound, eh?
Before we let you go, I want to bring you back to New Zealand and talk a little bit about breakfast TV. And
Yeah.
I'm fascinated in the dynamic there of how you get that job, how they match you up with Hilary Barry, like what the conversation is like between you two. Do they test you for sort of on-camera dynamic, or are you both well known enough at that point that it's just they're guessing that it's going to work well?
Yeah, it was pretty like I was in America. I'd been there for 5 years, and I was tired because I was doing a lot of massacres.
Covering them.
Yes.
You were covering. You were covering them.
You know how you were talking about how like the Herald or whatever just gets that one quote and puts it out. Yeah.
We'll clip that. We'll definitely clip that bit out.
No, you're fine. It's context is everything, though, right? I was just tired, and so I was looking for a change and kind of ready for a bit of just to mix things up. And so I think they contacted me and said, "Oh, would you be interested in hosting with Hilary?" And so we talked on Skype a couple of times, and then came back, and I'd maybe met her in person once. So that's definitely a suboptimal thing. We were very lucky in that we got along super well, and we actually had quite a similar background and similar values and interests and stuff. So we kind of got along really well.
Are the
I
producers
will say this:
organising-
I don't think I was very well suited to breakfast. So I learned that the hard way, I think. And that I was working too much. So doing breakfast and a radio show on the weekend is not a good idea because breakfast just completely saps you of all your energy. I think also it's probably a show where it's quite good to have people who have kids and can kind of talk about those experiences more because you're more relatable to the audience. And I was kind of interested in, longer interviews and harder interviews and that sort of thing, which maybe wasn't super well suited as well. So I just found that Breakfast After, I did it for 2.5 or 3 years maybe, and I felt like it was the best show with the worst hours, which is something that people always say, and that there were just these amazing, funny, light moments, and I loved working with my team. But I also, I just felt jet lagged all the time. I felt like it was every day that I worked it, I was aging 2 days, and I just wasn't maybe the best version of myself. So, I was quite, after 2.5 or 3 years, I was quite like, oof.
Because what time is the alarm clock going off?
I was going to like bed at 3. I was getting up at 3:30.
Plus 3.
Yeah,
That's early.
which is,
That's early by
look, don't get me wrong,
anyone's
it's
standards.
early, right? Look, it's awesome. You're paid super well. It's a position of absolute privilege. And I always thought you're the first voice that people wake up to in the morning, which is huge. But there's something about TV, even more than morning radio, that is just grueling. And John Campbell's found that as well. It just, most people don't last in it that long in New Zealand because it just wears you down. And again, using all of that, using all your social energy, using all of that kind of enthusiasm you have and communicative energy and, thinking on your feet, using all of that in a space of 3 hours, just kind of left me with nothing else for the rest of my day. And so I wasn't super happy. Yeah. But honestly, if you're going to go and do something like that, do it with Hilary Barry.
Yeah.
She's just the best. Yeah, yeah.
Come on, Hillary, if you're listening.
Always
Fan. Yeah.
super emotional goodbyes on that when people leave it.
Yeah.
Like John Campbell's last
It was
week
super emotional, right?
was really charged. Daniel Faitawa's was, but that was slightly different because he had a
Yeah.
personal circumstance with his
Yeah.
brother who was terminally ill.
Yeah.
Was
think-
yours like that? Or did you just later, guys?
No, I think it was. Although,
I couldn't find it on anywhere, so maybe it wasn't as
do you know?
emotional as some of the others.
I don't even fucking remember.
It was.
I think it was.
You just said I'm leaving, and John Campbell's taken over.
I think that's when maybe I wasn't into the big emotion at the time. I felt emotional about it, but I also, I think I was probably pretty, I just had no doubt that it was the best thing for me to do. I was honestly, I was spent. I just couldn't really function, and so I just, outside of work, and it was just consuming me, and I was single. I was 31 or 32, trying to date, and I was like, what? No one on their deathbed ever thinks, oh, I wish I worked harder. And so, yeah, I was really sad to leave because the team is really tight when you work together in those crazy hours, and you're often dealing with big breaking news, oh, there's a tsunami alert or whatever, there's something massive's happened overnight, everyone's got to scramble, everyone's got to pull together. It is really emotional. And I've stayed good friends with the breakfast team. I work in the same office with them every day, so we go and get lunch and stuff all the time. But it is just, you can't understate how, I couldn't understate how it affected me, how grueling it was over time, yeah. There's also, sorry, one last thing, there's also a real incentive to be provocative, and I just wasn't into that. It wasn't me. I couldn't come out and be like, hey, you know what I hate? Beneficiaries. Wasn't, it just, and that's maybe some people maybe just have stronger opinions than I do, but I'm an opinionated person, but I'm sort of not. I'm always one who's like, well, I can kind of I can always kind of see both sides of things a little bit,
Yeah.
and that doesn't necessarily make for good TV. I'm like, oh yeah. So yeah, I don't miss those alarms.
Is your balance better now? You've had some fucking amazing jobs.
It's ridiculous,
Q&A is one of the great jobs as well. It appears that you can kind of work the week to your schedule better. Are you in a better place now?
Yeah, totally. No, I was talking to JC last week. It's a John Campbell, and said,
Oh, Jesus.
yeah, the name drop there. It was Easter. I was talking to both. No, I was talking to John, and I was like, one thing I do remember is when I stopped getting up at 3:30, how quickly my body was like, yeah, that's right, we wake up at 7 now.
Yeah.
Like, it took 2 days. I thought, it's going to take me months to transition back. No, it was like, good, we get up at 7 o'clock now. And yeah, so I do have better balance. I still work super hard. But one of the problems with broadcasting is that you feel like there are a finite number of jobs, especially in New Zealand, especially for someone like me. And so it's kind of hard to say no to things. And I also just enjoy it. It's all I've ever known. I started working when I was still studying, and I probably get an unhealthy amount of my kind of sense of self and purpose and things from work. But I've absolutely improved it so much in the last few years, in that I hold regular hours and have good relationships and stuff. And so I don't regret doing early mornings as such, and I have just benefited from the most amazing opportunities throughout my career so far. I don't know how long they're going to last. Truth be told, no one lasts forever. Holmesy didn't last forever. Paul Henry didn't last forever. No broadcaster lasts forever. And so I just sort of am quite happy to be appreciative for the opportunities while I've got them, make the most of them, and then see what comes next, I guess.
How far into the future do you look? 10 years down the track, Jack Tame, is he more TV? Is it radio? Is it writing?
It might honestly be none of those three things. I don't know. I have no grand plan. I have no desires to... Part of me thinks I would really like to run a business. Part of me thinks I would really like to... my brother works for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and part of me just thinks I'd love to do that. Part of me thinks... I did a couple of years ago. I did a few months in Colombia, just going to Spanish school every day, and I was like, this is me. I'm quite happy to do this. So I'm kind of open to whatever comes next. I do think that as you get older, or as you go through life, your priorities change, right? So whatever you valued at 20, you don't necessarily value at 30 and 40, etc. And so I can imagine that having a family or that sort of thing would change my priorities once again. But for the time being, I'm quite happy just to go, thank you for letting me do this. It's so much better than, being an accountant or working at Bunnings or whatever. And, not to bag on those.
Shout out
but,
to the accountants and Bunnings workers out there.
Bunnings accountants right now are feeling really shitty. Sorry about that. No, you know what I mean? Like, it's, fuck, man, there are so many people who'd want my job, and I try not to.
It's also an industry where it's impossible to predict what the future's going to look like. You're talking about 10 years' time. My job won't exist in 10 years' time. Doing stories for a website,
Who
probably not.
knows?
Like, who knows?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, the media's changing so rapidly that I'd like to think that in New Zealand we will still put value in. And actually, I wonder, as the world becomes more tribal and we see these kind of crazy politics in the US and France and Europe and everywhere else, that maybe in New Zealand we will buck the trend and we will go, actually we value, good information more than ever. Like it's nuts how social media's kind of taken over our media space and is completely unregulated, and we have no idea what it's doing, except that it seems to be leading to all these crazy tensions and divisions and mad tribalism that's tearing the fabric of democratic societies apart. I don't know what the solution is. I sort of hope that it's like fast food, in that, McDonald's has this big surge, and, for everyone goes, oh my gosh, it's amazing, and the places that led the fast food revolution, namely the coasts in America, the east and west coast in America, are the same places that are now leading the farm to table and the vegan and all that sort of thing. And I wonder I optimistically hope that the media might follow the same trajectory, and that the places that have undermined faith in good information and have undermined an equitable distribution of honest information are the same places that will go, oh my God, actually we need to find a way to use these tools in a way that is better for democracies and stuff. And that in little old New Zealand, that might mean that actually we put more value in good, honest news and information
Sounds to me like you're saying the answer is long-form podcast with a bit of a sports twist, but
That's
with
it.
occasional
We didn't even talk
TV
sport.
No, we don't need to. We don't need to. Few little bits and pieces that's
Yeah.
getting on. Shay, I know you've got a little checklist there. How we doing?
Good, very good. The only thing I do want to fact check, are you a Seattle Seahawks fan?
No.
Oh,
Why did you say that?
I just thought I heard it somewhere.
Nah, not
I was
really.
hoping that we'd have more
I mean,
commonalities.
I dated a girl who was from Alabama once, and I got really, for about 6 months, I got really into college football. Yeah. So, but in
That was
terms
niche
of
areas. I'll cut that out. It's shit.
no,
Shit
no,
chat.
it's good.
Nah, don't
This
beat
is the
yourself up,
gold.
Shay.
This is the
Come
gold
on.
shade. No.
Come on.
I'm not a Seahawks fan specifically, but I am a football fan. I think that football's like totally underrated by New Zealand. The thing I love about it is it's like war, and the coaches are like generals, and that everyone has a really specific role. And I love watching American football. I was a massive Marshawn and Lynch fan.
Beast
So,
mode.
Yeah,
now
and
we're
Beast mode. And oh my
now we're in
god.
the right-
Yeah. No, I don't know if you
of
follow
the
him
Seattle
on.
Kraken now.
Yeah, exactly.
With Macklemore.
Although that was a very disappointing into his career. That Super Bowl, remember that pass?
Well, I mean, he came back for the Raiders.
I know, but that was a anyway.
Yeah. I watched. I was in. Yeah.
Yeah, that was an amazing moment. Yeah.
We need to get some beast mode gear together.
And then I'm a big basketball fan, of course.
Stephen Adams.
I did a lot of coverage.
You can't just say basketball players
Huh?
when he says he likes
No,
basketball.
No, but I did.
You tracked the whole career, right?
I
Are
did.
you still in
Yeah.
contact with him?
I was there. I shot with him when he was in Penn. When he was playing like college ball in Pennsylvania. I was there on draft night with him. I was there. I went to the
That
playoffs
sounds like quite a
with
cool
him
story.
3 times.
Does
It
it
was
make you
amazing.
feel like a tiny little human of a man?
The crazy thing about Stephen Adams is that he.
I thought you were going to say like a tiny little piece of his success. That you were there. You were there that night. Like Jack, thanks,
you can answer
man.
that too.
I mean, obviously he's an enormous human being. I'm maybe 6'1", and I look at Stephen. I crane my neck. Like he's a foot taller than me. But when I was in New York the first time he went to New York, and he was playing in March Madness, or maybe it was ahead of the draft, maybe draft combine, or I don't know, whatever. It was ahead of the draft, and it was ahead of the draft. He was there for a few days, and I was like, "Yo, let's like I'll show you the city. We'll go out, do some stuff," and he was just super scared about a few things. So like he felt really uncomfortable on the subway because he thought it was dodgy. He thought he was going to be
so
robbed.
Tall, like
Yeah,
you
no.
could-
That's what I thought. I thought he's going to be uncomfortable. He didn't make walking through a turnstile a very, like he didn't look good when he did it, But
We're gonna
he,
get to your dancing soon. Too.
but he thought he was going to be robbed on the subway. I was like, Stephen, no one is going to rob you. You are two people standing here, And it was nuts. He had this evening with him once where we went to Chipotle and got burritos, and I bought him a burrito. It was when he was a student before he made the NBA, and he had no money. And he was just like, "Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it." It was like a $7 burrito. I remember he had no money on his phone, so he couldn't text you back. It was fucking annoying. And then a couple of years later, he's signing a $40 million contract. I just think it's extraordinary that in the space of a couple of years, he kind of had the contrast of those experiences.
But do you keep in contact with him? Like,
No. I mean, I have his phone number and occasionally text him. And I don't know, maybe he's still not got any money on his phone. Yeah, but I mean, it's pretty remarkable watching someone like that. Yeah.
the come up.
Yeah.
There
Okay, last one from me,
And then
I'll
I
let
will-
You
yeah.
Shane,
Yeah.
do the outro. Okay, and
What's
it's again we're going back to Chang, unfortunately.
Please,
It's not an
please.
outro.
Oh, you see, you
It
started
says,
with the nice stuff, and this is going to be the mean stuff. Yeah.
It says, despite his apparent coordination issues and being more akin to a wounded pterodactyl when exercising, he went through a
referenced
spell
that.
Yeah.
when he was regularly attending bachata dance
Bachata.
classes.
Bachata.
Dance classes.
Yes. No, I did do some. I briefly did some bachata classes. That was great. I wasn't very good, but I thought for a while there that I would get into bachata dancing, but maybe it was the pandemic. It just didn't seem like the best thing to be doing. I do love dancing. This is how Beyonce came around. I once upon a time was in with a cool set in New York. And-
Jay-Z.
Yeah, and went to a club and was like, oh, there's no one in the club. And we knew the bouncer for whatever reason. So we went to this bouncer. Downstairs we went. And I was sitting in the club, and I was like, no one here, that's all good. And I was dancing away, not bachata, but whatever. And I looked across the room, and I was like, oh, is that Jessica Biel? Interesting. I was like, is she next to, is that Timberland? Yeah, it's next to Timberland. And I'd inadvertently walked into the after party for Jay-Z and Justin Timberlake's Madison Square Garden, no, Yankee Stadium gig, right? And honestly, there were like 30 people in the room. And no one was dancing, but I was super keen to dance, and I had a few drinks, whatever, and so I was like dancing away. And it was me and this one other woman. And then I looked at her and I was like, oh my God, it's Beyonce Knowles. I'm dancing next to Beyonce Knowles. So I went up and I bro-shaked Jay-Z, and then I went to Justin Timberlake. I walked over to him and I panicked and I said, I really love everything you've ever done. My name's Jack and I'm from New Zealand. Yeah.
Right, Shay, wrap us up.
Oh, look, amazing to spend some time with you. We only ever see the little screen, right? And there's been snippets of your personality through all the different things that you've done, but to spend this time to kind of unpack everything that you've done, and it's an unfair criticism, like, you look so young, how can this guy know what he's on about? Like, when you sit here and you rattle off the things and the experiences that you've had, it's phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. My only wish for you is that you would have got today's Worldle in 2 guesses.
Are we going to finish this? Should we, just for the sake of...
the narrative.
Yeah, just for the sake of the narrative. So I've got 3 more guesses.
Well, Paul Holmes said this. You build the narrative. Yeah.
I've said Turkmenistan, I've said Azerbaijan, I've said Georgia. It's 780 kilometres southwest of Georgia.
Don't look
Steve,
at
I'm
him.
looking at you
You're
here.
looking at me like I'm going to give any sort of production.
Now you're not
feedback.
looking at the map.
Okay, I'm going to say Romania.
Oh, dear. Are you even trying?
94%. Okay,
Look at the map.
No, I know. Shut up. I'm stressing out here, okay?
Yeah, just take it easy.
Okay.
Come on, Jack. Come on, you got this.
No.
Come on, the people need this. The people that are still here, they need closure.
Okay. No, I'm panicking. You know.
No, it's just slow down.
Okay.
Think it through.
Maybe you can give them a clue, Shay.
Maybe look at the map.
No. It's okay. So we got. Yeah, there we got Syria.
He's flustered, guys.
I'm flustered.
I don't know if he's getting this.
I don't think we're getting this, eh? I'm going to say...
I thought you'd be like right into...
I honestly thought you'd be good at geography.
I'm as disappointed as everyone else.
You wrote a whole column on this about how...
I'm as disappointed as everyone else.
What did you just put?
I put Iraq.
Oh, dear.
Oh, I know. It's just getting worse and worse and worse.
Oh, dear. This is
What's
the last guess now, isn't it?
What am I missing?
Yeah.
Iraq,
What letters
Romania,
does it start
Georgia,
with, Shay?
Azerbaijan.
I mean, you were good with your first guess. You were right in the
Stars.
area.
Oh, no, I wasn't. I was 2,000 kilometres away.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of the sound of it.
Turkmenistan.
Yep.
Oh, it's Turkey.
Turkmenistan.
Fucking hell, it's
Yeah.
Turkey. That's
Turkey.
embarrassing.
Yeah, it isn't.
Yeah.
You're right with the sound of it. It's a hollow victory, really, isn't it? Yeah.
It's kind of a bit of a downer to finish. I feel like he feels defeated.
I thought I'd see the Dardanelles a little more clearly.
Yeah, now he's
I
just
didn't.
trying to show off.
I didn't. Look, thanks, guys. It's been my pleasure. Thank you for whipping me in Worldle.
Yeah.
Cradle. I won't forget
Hurdle?
what
You
say.
do hurdle?
No, I haven't done Hurdle. Or Loodle. That
Yeah.
one with
Bullets?
words? Yeah.
Right, I'm going to shut this down, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, Jack, thank you so much.
No,
That's
my
been
pleasure,
brilliant.
guys. Keep
Loved
up the
it.
great work. Yeah.